Oké, dit werkt. My great-grandfather has always been a very controversial man in the family. Nobody seemed to have anything positive to say about him, yet at his work he was very well respected and a liked man. My mother always contributed this to post-traumatic stress disorder, which he supposedly had contracted during the Second World War. So I decided to find out if this was true or not, if I could find out at all. For the investigation I used a number of sources and went abroad to a number of places in France and England.
De ideale soldaat wordt niet vanzelf gebeuren. Hij is het resultaat van wilskracht en training. It is a long way to the Brandenburger Tor.
Adriaan Meulenberg was born on January 3rd, 1894 in Wissekerke in Zeeland. He was born to a peasant family and became a farm worker, like his father. At 20 years of age, he would join the 14th Infantry Regiment in the Royal Dutch Army, to get away from the poverty. This was the start of a long military career. A year later, he would join the Marechaussee, which is best translated to Royal Military Police. Here he would act as a border police in several places in the Netherlands, and eventually climb to the rank of warrant officer. On the 14th of June 1923, he would marry Digna Adriana de Geus. Together they would have 9 children, 2 of which would pass prematurely, one at 2 months old on Adriaan's birthday, and the other at 6 years old during the Second World War due to kidney issues. In the military, Adriaan was rowdy, uncivilized, hot-tempered and generally unfit for promotion. A report from 1922 even shows that he was provoking arguments between 2 of his subordinates. In the next few years, however, he would change. He became well-mannered, civilized and generally made a good impression. He did make some mistakes, however, as in 1936, in Valkenswaard, he didn't lock his cell door properly, allowing 2 inmates to escape.
Next, the invasion of Holland and Belgium, as the powerful Nazi air arm and panzers moved toward Paris.
On the 10th of May 1940, war breaks out. Germany invades Luxembourg, Belgium and the Netherlands. The military police is ordered to gather in Roosendaal, from where they would head to the Dutch waterline. German Fallschirmjägers had taken the bridges near Rotterdam, cutting the military police off from their destination. So instead, they were ordered to link up with the French 7th Army, which had arrived in Zeeland. As the rest of the Netherlands fell, Zeeland and the men now under French command were excluded in the capitulation. They stayed in Hulst until the 17th of May, when they received the orders to head to an airfield near Nantes, where a detachment of the Royal Dutch Air Force was stationed. In the meantime, the Germans steadily progressed through Zeeland. The trip brought them through the open fields of Flanders and northern France. Here they were incredibly vulnerable to air raids. As they moved their way to Abbeville, they were constantly harassed by German aircraft, forcing the civilians and the soldiers in the column to jump into the ditches for cover. They arrived in Abbeville on the 20th of May. The same day, a German recon unit arrived 12 kilometers west of Abbeville. They had virtually driven past each other. They left the city the same day as the bombings became more and more aggressive. Had they stayed a day longer, they would have been overrun by the 2nd Panzer Division. What is important to realize is that Adriaan was 46 years old at this point, and most of their traveling was done by bicycle, which wasn't exactly easy considering France's geography. From Rouen onwards, food and clean drinking water weren't always a guarantee, and they slept in fields or in barns. Near Rouen, a colleague of Adriaan from back in Valkenswaard had a tire leak and stopped a bus with Dutch troops in it, to ask if he could ride with them. The men inside yelled that the driver should keep going. In response, the man pulled out his rifle, threatening to shoot them if they didn't let him in. So, they let him in. On the 24th of May, they arrived in Nantes, where due to their lack of accommodation, they were redirected to Vertou. On the 27th of May, they received orders to head to Caen instead. They arrived there the next day. At first, they were housed in this building, La Baronnie, in Douvres. The next day, however, they were moved to a school building in Cresseron. As there was no Dutch-speaking reverend in the area, Adriaan hosted 2 church services himself. He was a Reformed Christian and spoke to more than 100 men on both occasions. The men were both Catholic and Reformed, but that didn't matter. Normal life continued relatively well in Caen. At some point, they even went swimming in Luxembourg. From Caen, they were redirected to Brest on the 7th of June. They left on the 9th and arrived there on the 10th. The SS Princess Beatrix took them to Plymouth under escort by 2 French destroyers, 2 armed merchant vessels and a French flying boat.
De sergeant-majoor is de moeder van het regiment. Sommige mensen zeggen de stiefmoeder.
The Dutchmen who arrived in England were gathered in a tent camp called Danny Craig, near Porthcawl. The British treated them more like POWs than allies, as every man was thoroughly checked. No one could leave the camp, and the locals couldn't sell them anything. The distrust diminished over time. As the Royal Military Police took over police duties, trips to Porthcawl became more and more frequent, and the locals became very good friends with the Dutchmen. At one point, the Canadian airman from an airfield nearby Danny Craig had made the bet that he could fly his Hawker Hurricane in between the tents. Doing so, he hit the guy lines of one of the tents, pulling part of it with him and injuring one of the men inside. In Wales, the mishmash of Dutch troops were called the Royal Detachments of Dutch Troops in Great Britain. But they were renamed to the Dutch Legion, as the British used the term Foreign Legions for units from abroad. In Porthcawl, the Music Corps was also formed, which included the soon-to-be men's choir, which Adriaan was an advocate for and member of. On the 25th of August, Adriaan Meulenberg arrived to his unit with a large stack of letters in his arms. The letters were from the families left behind in the Netherlands. They came from the Red Cross, through which a slow and inconsistent correspondence could be held by way of its office in neutral Switzerland. By late summer, it became clear that the tent camp wasn't going to be suitable for winter nights, so an effort was made to find a more permanent solution. The final farewell was held in the Grand Pavilion on the 26th of September. It was an evening of song and music. Songs were sung like the Silver Float and Rule Britannia. 3 days later, the men's choir handed the Highfields Church a signed photo album as a thank you for everything the church had done for them. In Porthcawl, the Dutch troops were described as incredibly demoralized, especially in the beginning. However, they were still very jovial and integrated well with the locals.
Ze noemen een Engelse soldaat een Tommy, maar de Tommy gun komt uit Amerika. Al Capone gebruikte hem dagelijks.
On the 1st of October, Adriaan Meulenberg arrived in Congleton with the rest of the Music Corps. The next day, the rest of the Legion would arrive. Under great interest from the locals, they would march their way into town singing marching songs, such as Piet Hein. The Dutch Legion was housed in a number of mills across town. They were poorly insulated and very flammable. Adriaan, together with the rest of the military police department, was stationed in this mill specifically, the Vale Mill, relatively close to the center of town. On the 24th October, Adriaan Meulenberg came to an evening meeting in the local Congregational Church, carrying 62 letters from the Red Cross. They were often dated by several months and written in telegram style. This, however, did not lessen the excitement of once again reading a letter from the loved one. On the 15th of March, Adriaan left for London to stay with a Dutch family for a week. No further mentions were made of Adriaan during his time in Congleton. In January, the Dutch Legion was renamed to the Royal Dutch Brigade, in agreement with Queen Wilhelmina and Prince Bernhard. However, their conditions for another royal addition to the name would be that the unit was better exercised and better organized.
Engelse les. Dat was voor vele soldaten van de brigade een noodzakelijkheid. Van de geboden gelegenheid om Engels op te steken wordt ruimschoots gebruik gemaakt.
In 1940, the Dutch government made plans to build a proper military camp for the Dutch Legion. An RAF camp nearby Wolverhampton was chosen as a suitable location. The camp was finished in 1941 and the main force, most likely containing Adriaan, moved in on July 10th. In fear of any spy activity in the area, the camp was to be kept secret. The locals referred to it as the Dutch camp at Cranmore Lodge, and the military simply referred to it as Wolverhampton. On the 26th of August, 1941, Queen Wilhelmina and Prince Bernhard were convinced that the issues in the Legion were successfully addressed, and renamed it to the Princess Irene Brigade the next day. The ceremony included a speech to the troops, an inspection of the troops, and the Queen handing over an official banner to the brigade. In 1943, the brigade released a propaganda film called Glorious Colors, where Adriaan can clearly be seen seated at the front during a speech with the men's choir. Not much is known of Adriaan during his time in Wolverhampton, as none of the sources mention him during this time. Adriaan Meulenberg would remain in Wolverhampton until the 15th of April, 1944. He was, like many overage men, transferred to work for the troop detachment of the military authority in London. The military authority was a Dutch body of government responsible for the soon-to-be liberated areas of the Netherlands. The brigade itself would remain in Wolverhampton until August. On August 1st, the order came to ship to France, almost 2 months after the initial D-Day invasions. Here the brigade would be deployed and would experience combat, for some for the first time. Adriaan Meulenberg would remain in London until the 6th of November, when he was shipped to Brussels, where he arrived on the 11th. Here he would continue working with the Dutch military authority in the liberated parts of the Netherlands.
De bomaanval uit deze oorlog, en wel met 1000 vliegtuigen tegelijk, heeft in de afgelopen nacht plaatsgevonden boven Keulen.
After the Second World War, Adriaan Meulenberg would remain in the military police, retaining the rank of warrant officer. He would be stationed in Budel, then Eindhoven, and eventually in Amersfoort until 1951. Regardless of the war being over, Adriaan wouldn't live together with his family until 1948 in Amersfoort. This is 8 years after his sudden departure. On August 17, 1950, Adriaan Meulenberg received a Golden Medal for 36 years of service in the Royal Military Police. Up until his retirement out of the National Reserve on the 1st of May 1958, he would remain in service, doing his work well, but neglecting his family in the meantime. He would eventually pass on the 28th of March 1976 due to dementia, which he had been suffering from for a decade. During both the ceremony for his retirement and his Golden Medal, Adriaan received words of praise. He was seen as the unit's backbone and responsible for the unit's discipline and good structure. During his retirement ceremony, the division commander said that he hoped that the unit would keep its solidarity and camaraderie that Adriaan had created. This was all in stark contrast to how he was in person. To find out how he was in person, and towards his family, I interviewed my grandfather, who is Adriaan's youngest son and also called Adriaan. I also tried to get an interview with the daughter of Adriaan, who knew him from before the war. She unfortunately declined, but she did say that he was like that even before the war. Kan je het karakter van Adriaan Meulenberg beschrijven?
Het karakter?
Ja.
Een heel sterk karakter.
Ja?
Een echt Zeeuws karakter.
Sterk als in?
Nou, als je... Ja, wat ze tegenwoordig noemen, wat hij in zijn kop heeft, heeft hij niet ergens anders zitten. En wat hij wilde, moest ook gebeuren. Want anders waren dat is ook zoiets van deze tijd, de rapengaard.
Ja.
Ja.
Kan je je relatie met jouw vader beschrijven?
Een relatie met mijn vader, die bewoog zich van matig tot slecht.
Ja?
Ja.
En hoe verliep dit dan?
Omdat de man altijd eigenlijk een beetje in zichzelf leefde en niet met de wereld mee kon. Niet met de tijd mee kon.
Hij bleef zeg maar hangen.
Hij bleef daarin hangen en elke vernieuwing was, en verbetering, volgens ons dan, was voor hem, stelde niks voor. Daar kon hij niet in meekomen.
Hij negeerde het ook dan compleet.
Ja. Ja.
De symptomen van PTSD,
Ja.
als je die dan doorleest, herken jij je vader daarin?
Ja, ja, zeker. Het een grote... en niet dat het op een bepaald moment was. Nee, het was de hele tijd door. Als die man op zijn werk was, dan was hij heel anders als dat hij thuis kwam. Zodra hij die deur binnenkwam, dan sloeg de stemming om binnen naar nulpunt. Dus hij was eigenlijk op zijn werk, was hij ook gezien. Was hij accuraat en noem maar op en al die dingen meer. Maar thuis, dan gebruikte hij gewoon om zich af te reageren. Nou ja, dat was gewoon, als hij iets zag wat hij vond dat niet deugde, of hij had maar iets in de gaten, of hij dacht van dat je wat verkeerd deed, dan kreeg je de wind van voren, niet zo zuinig. Dat is niet zo zuinig. En hij kon dus heel streng kijken. En als hem dat helemaal niet zinde, dan stond hij zijn eigen op te winden gewoon. En ja, ik wil niet zeggen dat hij het schuim op zijn mond kreeg, maar dat scheelde toch niet veel.
En hoe heeft het gedrag van jouw vader jouw eigen gedrag beïnvloed en de manier hoe jij je eigen familie hebt opgevoed?
Ja, dat is dat je vroeger dacht van, kijk zoals die oude heer tekeer had. En, dat wil ik niet zo doen later.
Dus je wou het echt wel anders doen?
Dat was je eerste voornemen natuurlijk. Kijk, of dat gelukt is, dat weet ik niet. Dat moet een ander beoordelen. Maar dat was hetgene wat in je opkwam. Zoals die man doet. Ik heb dikwijls, om eerlijk de waarheid te zeggen, gedacht van... Die man had liever niet gehad dat ik er geweest was. Of mijn broer, of mijn zusters.
En dat...
Zo dat hij tekeer ging om niks. Ja, die man die was... ja, we konden gewoon niet met elkaar overweg.
Nee.
En niemand niet bij ons.
Die zou ook niks positiefs over hem kunnen zeggen. Verder, of...
Nee, dat zou ik niet durven. Dan moet ik dingen weglaten die ik denk van ja, die zijn wel gebeurd, maar daar heb ik het niet over of wat dan ook. Maar nee. Ja, positief was eigenlijk dat we 's morgens met hem gingen aardbeien plukken. Want dat kon dan wel, hè.
Ja.
Voor school, want dat bracht de patiënt op. Ja. En dan gingen we naar de Hoge Weg en er was een aardbeienveldje bij de boer. En nou, dan was 's morgens om 6:30 aan de gang. En om 8:30 ging ik naar school.
Ja.
Nou ja, van die verschillende kistjes volgeplukt, hè. En het eerste wat hij zei, van die... En je steekt ze niet in je mond, hè. Nee, dat zou wel niet, nee. Maar dat is ook geen positief ding, toch?
Nee.
Nee, ik zit een beetje na te denken erover, over die positieve dingen, maar dat kan me eigenlijk op het moment geen echt te binnen schieten.
Het is erg moeilijk om te bedenken.
Ja. Oh, je vergeet zoveel, want er zijn ontzettend veel dingen gebeurd die... Ja, ik denk, ja, jij bent mijn vader niet, dan denk je dan van, joh, ga alsjeblieft weg.
Als kind zijnde?
Ja, ga alsjeblieft weg.
Ja.
Want dan is het gezellig binnen. Dan is het gezellig.
Ja.
Maar er was altijd strijd.
Dus bij jullie thuis voelden ze eigenlijk...
Niet thuis.
Vervreemd.
Ja, hij kon er niet meer overweg, denk ik. En dat zal misschien wel gebeurd zijn en gekomen zijn door zijn tijd in Engeland. Dat hij daar, dus 3,5 jaar weg geweest, een beetje. In 40 weggegaan, nee, meer. Hij is 4,5 jaar weg geweest.
Ja.
Dus dat doet wel met je.
Dat verandert je wel, ja.
Dat geef ik wel een hoop de schuld aan, maar ja, het karakter, dat blijft toch, hè. Dat was al voor die tijd daar. Dus, maar dat zeg ik weet niet hoe het voor die tijd was. Of die toen ook al zo was. Maar dat denk ik wel.
Ja.
Ja.
Dan zou jij zeggen dat jouw vader last had van PTSD?
Jazeker. Ja, de hele tijd door.
Geen twijfel aan.
Nee.
When somebody experienced a traumatic event, such as a robbery, sexual assault or abuse, a car accident, a natural disaster, or some form of war or conflict, there is a large chance that will have a psychological effect on that person. A number of symptoms of dealing with a traumatic experience are trouble with sleeping, hypervigilance or jumpiness, obtaining a negative view of the world or oneself, loss of interest in hobbies or daily activities, extreme sadness or even full-on depression. A good way to describe it is that people who suffer from it feel numb, even when around the ones they love. This effect generally lasts a few weeks to a number of months, depending on the severity of the event and the type of person it affects. There is, however, a chance that it evolves into post-traumatic stress disorder. PTSD is a worse form of the aforementioned symptoms that can last anywhere between a number of months to several years, and it can happen years after the traumatic event actually takes place. Someone with a history of physical or sexual abuse, substance abuse and/or an unstable home situation is especially vulnerable to developing PTSD. A defining symptom of PTSD is the flashbacks, also known as intrusive memories. These can happen as dreams, but it can also be triggered in everyday situations. For example, a door that is slammed shut can sound like a gunshot and pull someone back into their traumatic experience. PTSD also has physical effects on someone. Not only is it often coupled with substance abuse, automutilation, and substantially increased chances of suicide, it can also affect one's immune systems, fertility, and can even cause heart and vascular diseases and respiratory issues. PTSD only became known during the First World War, but it was coined as shell shock. Despite the truly awful situations the men during that war found themselves in, it was regarded as a sign of weakness and could be used as a cause for execution, as was seen by some as treason to the nation. After the Second World War, it gained traction once more, but support for those afflicted by it was still minimal. Only after the Vietnam War did it become a well-known disorder in the public eye. Despite this, support and guidance for those affected by PTSD is often still lacking, for both military personnel and civilians. A number of traumatic experiences responsible for PTSD can be seen in Adriaan Meulenberg's experiences during the Second World War. For one, suddenly having to leave everything behind to realize that you most likely won't see it again for a number of years isn't exactly easy for anyone. Secondly, on a few occasions such as Zeeland and Abbeville, the enemy was a mere kilometers behind them, which can of course cause a lot of fear and paranoia among the men. Thirdly, while moving through Flanders and northern France, they were constantly bombed and directly under fire by the Luftwaffe. As the Germans had air superiority at the time, the Luftwaffe could almost bomb indiscriminately. The bombings even claimed the lives of a few Dutchmen. The second and third cause would have been the biggest and most direct cause for the development of PTSD, as their lives were genuinely threatened and to many it felt like the Germans were chasing them. But the first cause would have a longer effect, as the men would remain separated from friends and family until the end of the war. As for the symptoms, a few can be recognized in the description of his behavior. For example, his negligence towards his family can be associated with obtaining a negative view of the world or himself, and a loss of interest in hobbies and daily activities. Secondly, he was also described as hypervigilant, not in the sense of being very jumpy and easily scared, but in the sense of constantly paying extreme attention to his surroundings and the people around him. From everything I've read and seen, my answer to the question whether Adriaan had PTSD or not is yes, probably. He most likely did suffer from PTSD in one way or another, and his traumatic experiences had an effect on him in the long run. However, it is difficult to see to what extent, as a number of factors play into it. For example, the environment he found himself in after the war, which definitely fitted well with Adriaan, however didn't help with him processing his traumatic experiences. On top of that, he was a difficult and harsh man to begin with, making it difficult to distinguish the motivations behind certain actions. In the end, he isn't around anymore, so diagnosing him with PTSD, which is rarely straightforward in and of itself, is very difficult. However, based on the evidence we've gathered, it is very likely that his traumatic experiences did have an effect on him in the long run, and in turn had an effect on his family.